Millionaire husband abandoned his 8 months pregnant wife in the rain to teach her a lesson. He never imagined her bodyguard would appear. Rain came down in sheets that night, cold, merciless, and heavy enough to blur the world into streaks of silver. On the side of a deserted road stood Claire, 8 months pregnant, hair plastered to her face, one hand gripping her swollen belly, the other shaking as she tried to shield herself from the storm. And where was her husband? The man who once promised to protect her, love her, cherish her. He was gone. He had driven off with a smirk, convinced that leaving his wife stranded in the storm would teach her a lesson. That single moment, arrogant, cruel, unforgettable, was the seed of everything that followed, because this isn't just a story about a broken marriage. No, this is a story about betrayal that cut so deep it changed lives, about a man blinded by ego, and about a woman who, in her darkest hour, discovered that loyalty sometimes comes from the person you least expect. But let's rewind for a second. Because to understand the weight of that night, to truly grasp why Claire's story hit like a punch to the gut, you need to know who Daniel was before the mask slipped. On paper, a millionaire, self-made, charismatic, admired. He was the kind of man people pointed to and said, he's got it all. But behind closed doors, he wore his wealth like armor and wielded his power like a weapon. And Claire? She wasn't weak. She wasn't naive. She was a woman who had given up her own career, her independence, even her circle of friends, because Daniel convinced her that he would provide everything she needed. That illusion held until pregnancy stripped away the gloss and revealed just how cold he could be. So picture it, a storm raging, thunder rolling across the sky. Claire, left alone, her body trembling not just from the cold, but from the shattering realization that the man she trusted most was capable of this kind of cruelty. That night was supposed to break her. At least, that's what Daniel thought. But here's where arrogance always trips the powerful. Because Daniel didn't anticipate the headlights cutting through the rain. He didn't anticipate the familiar figure stepping out of that black SUV. And he definitely didn't anticipate that the very man he had once forced out of Claire's life, the bodyguard he thought he'd erased, would return at the exact moment she needed him most. Yeah, Daniel thought he was teaching a lesson. But in reality, he had just set the stage for his own downfall, and trust me, you're going to want to hear how it all unravels. Hey, if you love stories where justice isn't just served, it's served cold with a side of poetic irony, make sure to hit that subscribe button. These scripts take hours of digging, writing, and reliving second-hand rage, so your support truly keeps this channel alive. Now, let's start at the beginning. They met the way people dream of meeting, in a blur of champagne bubbles, stolen glances, and the kind of charm that could convince anyone they were living inside a romance novel. Claire had been working late at a charity gala when Daniel, the young self-made millionaire, appeared at her table. He didn't just ask for her name. He made her feel as if she was the only name worth knowing in the entire room. That night marked the start of what felt like a whirlwind. Flowers delivered to her office. Surprise weekend getaways. Candlelit dinners in cities she had only ever seen in magazines. Daniel had a way of turning ordinary moments into grand gestures, and Claire, well, she fell hard. Who wouldn't? At first, it was magic. He spoke of forever with a conviction that made her believe in it. He admired her ambition, encouraged her dreams, and painted a picture of a life where they would grow together. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the story shifted. When Daniel's business empire began to soar, so did his ego. Success hardened him, polishing his charm into something more like a performance than a truth. The man who once stayed up late listening to Claire talk about her work began asking why she still bothered. Why stress yourself? He'd say with a shrug, sipping his scotch, I make more in a week than you'll see in a year. Isn't that enough for both of us? It was meant to sound like generosity. It landed like dismissal, and Claire, because she loved him, because she believed in him, chose to sacrifice. She left her career behind, convincing herself it was temporary. She moved into the sprawling mansion he had bought on the edge of the city, a fortress of glass and stone that felt more like his world than hers. She told herself she'd find her place there, that she could build a new kind of life, but the walls of that mansion were quiet, too quiet. Her days stretched long and empty while Daniel chased meetings, power, and status. The friends she used to see drifted away. Daniel didn't like the idea of her gossiping with people he didn't trust. And before she realized it, her world had shrunk to the size of his shadow. The cracks widened when Claire became pregnant. What she thought would be a new chapter of closeness became the opposite. Daniel, once so attentive, treated her exhaustion as weakness. When her feet swelled and her back ached, he joked about her being slower these days. When she admitted to her fears about becoming a mother, he rolled his eyes. Women have babies every day, Claire. You're not the first. Stop being dramatic. Little cuts, little dismissals. They add up, don't they? The worst part wasn't the words themselves, it was the way he looked at her, as though the woman he had once adored was now an inconvenience. The glow he had promised her was replaced with sighs, smirks, and silence. Claire tried to hold on. She told herself this was stress, that success had changed him temporarily, that once the baby arrived, maybe he'd soften again. But in the quiet of her room at night, when she pressed her hand against her stomach and felt the faint kicks beneath her skin, she wondered if she was lying to herself. And here's the thing about masks, once they slip, you can never unsee the face beneath. Daniel wasn't just stressed. He was changing. Or maybe he had always been this man, and she had simply been blinded by the glitter of his charm. Either way, Claire was starting to realize that the fairy tale she thought she was living in had rotted from the inside out. And if you've ever had that gut punch moment when someone you trusted becomes unrecognizable after getting exactly what they wanted, you know how shattering it feels. Have you ever realized someone changed completely after getting what they wanted? Drop your experience in the comments if you've been there, because Claire, she was living that nightmare in real time. And she hadn't even reached the breaking point yet. Dinner that night should have been simple. Pasta, salad, a quiet evening at home. But with Daniel, nothing was ever simple anymore. Claire had spent the day exhausted, her back aching, her ankles swollen, and every step a reminder of the tiny life she was carrying. She'd done her best, boiled the water, set the table, even lit a candle to make the moment feel warm again. She wanted normal. She wanted connection, but Daniel noticed only one thing. The food wasn't ready when he wanted it. Unbelievable, he muttered, loosening his tie, slamming his keys onto the counter. I work all day and you can't even manage dinner on time? Claire bit her lip, steadying her voice. I'm 8 months pregnant, Daniel. I'm doing the best I can best. He cut in with a laugh that wasn't really laughter. Claire, your best is slipping. You've let yourself go. You nag, you complain, and now you can't even cook pasta before I get home? The words stung, but worse than that they were becoming familiar, she didn't shout back. She didn't throw the plate she was holding, though for one wild second she thought about it. Instead, she placed it down gently and whispered, I wish you'd see how hard this is for me. That was the moment the spiral began. His face twisted with contempt. Respect, Claire? That's what's missing. You don't respect me. And if you can't learn it here, he jabbed a finger toward the kitchen. Toward the life they had built, then maybe you need a reminder. The next thing she knew, they were in the car. Rain hammered the windshield as he drove too fast through slick streets. Claire's hands clenched around her belly, every jolt of the tires rattling through her body. Her heart pounded harder than the storm outside. Daniel, please, just slow down. I don't feel safe, she said, her voice trembling. Safe? He barked a laugh. You're safe with me, but maybe you need to think about what happens when you push me too far. Lightning split the sky. The car swerved slightly as the tires hit a patch of water. Claire's breath hitched, terror rising in her throat. She reached out, touching his arm, but he shook her off as if she were a nuisance, and then, without warning, he pulled to the shoulder of the road. The engine idled, wipers smearing water across the glass. Out, he said flatly. She blinked. What? Get out. His jaw was tight, his eyes cold. Daniel, it's pouring. Look at me, I'm pregnant. You can't, this is your lesson, he snapped. You think you can talk back? You think your little complaints matter more than respect for your husband? Out of the car, Claire. Now, she hesitated, tears burning hot against the chill in her veins. For a fleeting moment, she hoped he was bluffing, that he'd let out a bitter laugh and tell her to relax, but he leaned across, opened her door, and hissed, Don't make me drag you. So she stepped out, into the rain, into the darkness, onto a stretch of road that felt more like exile than earth. The door slammed behind her, the red glow of his taillights flickering in the sheets of water. Then just like that he was gone, Claire stood there, soaked instantly, clothes clinging to her trembling frame. The storm howled around her, lightning painting the sky in violent flashes. She wrapped her arms around her stomach as if she could shield her unborn child from the world, from the rain, from the father who had just abandoned them. Her breaths came shallow, ragged. Fear knifed through her chest, fear not just of the storm, but of what it meant. The man who swore to protect her, to love her, had chosen cruelty instead. He had left her on the side of a road, 8 months pregnant, to teach her a lesson, and the weight of that realization crushed her more than the downpour ever could. She thought of the vows they had made, the promises whispered on starry nights, the laughter they once shared. And now it was reduced to this, a shivering, terrified woman clutching her belly while thunder rolled overhead. Her legs wobbled under her. Every kick from inside her felt like a reminder that she wasn't alone even if Daniel had abandoned her. She had someone worth fighting for. The rain blurred everything, the road stretching endlessly in both directions. How long could she last out here? Would someone find her? Or would she be just another forgotten soul swallowed by the storm? Her teeth chattered. Her body trembled. She whispered to herself, "Hold on, just hold on," and then through the roar of rain came another sound. A low hum, steady, growing louder. Headlights cut through the storm, slicing across her fragile silhouette. A vehicle slowed as it approached, tires hissing against wet asphalt. For a split second, Claire's heart froze. Was it Daniel coming back to gloat? Or worse, someone with intentions as dark as the night itself? She raised a trembling hand, shielding her eyes from the glare. The car stopped. The engine rumbled. A door opened, and in that moment, Claire's story shifted, because what stepped out of those headlights wasn't cruelty. It wasn't indifference. It was something else entirely, a presence she thought she'd lost forever, a figure Daniel had worked so hard to erase, her bodyguard. Here's your requested script draft for Act 3, The Return. Professionally paced, cinematic, and emotionally sharp, the storm hadn't let up. Claire stood there, shivering, rain dripping from her lashes, heart pounding in her chest. Her breaths came in shallow bursts as if even her body wasn't sure how much more it could take. And then headlights. At first, she flinched. Was Daniel coming back for her? Or was it some stranger, another danger waiting in the shadows? The car slowed. The door opened. And in that moment, Claire's world shifted. It was him, her former bodyguard. Broad-shouldered, steady-eyed, the kind of presence that filled the air without saying a word. He wasn't dressed for the storm, but he didn't care. He was already moving toward her, his voice cutting through the thunder. "Claire, get in. Now." That tone. Firm. Protective. The exact opposite of Daniel's sneering dismissal. Claire froze. Overwhelmed, but his hand was already at her elbow, steadying her, guiding her to safety. She collapsed into the passenger seat, clutching her belly, tears mixing with rain on her cheeks. Now, here's the thing about this man, let's call him Marcus. He wasn't just any bodyguard. He had been loyal, almost to a fault. The type who didn't just clock in and out, but made it his mission to ensure she was safe, even when she didn't notice it. And that, of course, had been Daniel's problem. Months earlier, Daniel had insisted Marcus be fired, claimed it was about budget, though money was never really the issue. The truth was uglier. Daniel couldn't stand how easily Marcus earned Claire's trust, how she felt at ease around him in a way Daniel no longer inspired. Jealousy is a funny thing. It eats away, not at what's wrong, but at what's right. And Daniel, with his inflated pride, couldn't stomach another man being a better reflection of what a protector should be. So he cut Marcus out, or at least he thought he had. Back in the car, Marcus drove carefully, windshield wipers working overtime. His jaw was tight, his eyes fixed on the road, but his voice was steady. "You're safe now. I've got you." Simple words, but they landed like a promise. Claire's chest cracked open with the weight of it all. Safe? Something she hadn't felt in months. She let out a shaky laugh, half sob, half relief. "Why? Why are you here?" she whispered. Marcus glanced at her, then back at the road. "Because I never stopped watching out for you. Didn't matter if Daniel signed the paperwork. You needed someone in your corner, and that's when the tears came freely. Because here was a man who had no obligation, no contract, no paycheck on the line, yet he showed up when it mattered most. Now, let me ask you, if you saw someone abandon their heavily pregnant spouse in the pouring rain, would you step in or stay out of it?" Because Marcus didn't hesitate. And in doing so, he didn't just pull Claire out of a storm. He reminded her of something far more powerful, that she was not alone, no matter how hard Daniel had tried to make her believe otherwise. And that night, That was the turning point. Claire's heart still ached, her body still shook from the cold, but for the first time in months, she felt something break free inside her. A fragile thread of hope, because Daniel's cruelty had pushed her out into the storm. But fate, or maybe just sheer loyalty, had sent Marcus right back into her life, and Daniel, he had no idea yet just how much that single act of arrogance was going to cost him. Got it? Here's your Act 4, the silent build-up script. It's paced like a professional narrator's delivery, cinematic yet personal, with natural tension and emotional momentum. Claire didn't crumble after that night. She could have, and no one would have blamed her, but instead, something inside her hardened. Not bitterness. Not yet. More like a quiet determination, the kind that doesn't scream for attention but sharpens itself in silence. Marcus became her anchor. He never overstepped, never tried to play savior, but his presence alone was steadying. He drove her to doctor's appointments, made sure she ate when her stomach twisted from stress, even reminded her that laughter still existed, like the time he smirked and said Daniel wouldn't last a week without someone checking his ego at the door. Claire actually laughed that day. It was small, but it was real. Meanwhile, Daniel strutted through his empire as if nothing had happened. His businesses flourished, his circle of sycophants praised his every move, and he paraded himself as the perfect husband to anyone who asked. But the truth? Small cracks had started forming. It began with whispers: an investor who wasn't impressed, a client who felt slighted, staff members quietly leaving. Tiny things, the sort of details a man like Daniel would ignore because arrogance blinds more effectively than any storm. And Claire, she noticed, she spent her days carefully, methodically, piecing together what he thought she was too naive to understand. While Daniel barked about respect and obedience, she slipped into his office, combed through his records, and learned. Bank accounts he never mentioned, properties listed under shell companies, debt hidden beneath polished spreadsheets. Every detail she uncovered was like pulling at a loose thread. And slowly, the fabric of Daniel's perfection began to unravel. Marcus once caught her late at night, papers spread across the desk. "You planning something?" he asked, his brow raised but his voice even. Claire didn't look up. "Not yet. But when the time comes, I want to be ready." He nodded once. "Then I'll be ready too." That was the unspoken agreement between them. He'd be her shield, but she would fight her own battle. Still, the weight of secrecy wasn't easy. Every morning, Daniel would brush past her with a kiss that felt more like an obligation than affection. He'd ask if she was comfortable, but his tone carried mockery, not care. And Claire would smile faintly, answering in clipped tones, hiding the fire simmering beneath her calm exterior, because here's the thing: when someone thinks you're powerless, they never see the storm you're quietly preparing, tension built in waves. Daniel boasted about future deals over candlelit dinners, while Claire silently filed away the names he dropped. He bragged about a risky investment, and she mentally calculated how exposed he truly was. He laughed at her for spending too much time reading, never realizing those late-night hours were the blueprint of his undoing. Her strength grew alongside her belly. What he saw as weakness, her pregnancy, became her greatest clarity. Every heartbeat she felt inside her reminded her survival wasn't optional anymore. She wasn't just protecting herself. She was protecting the future he had carelessly tried to discard, and here's where fate adds its poetic twist. While Daniel believed he'd humiliated his wife into obedience, Claire was quietly building a fortress he'd never see coming. A safety net woven from patience, knowledge, and just enough restraint to keep her steps invisible. The irony? He thought her silence meant surrender. But silence is rarely empty. Sometimes it's strategy. So let me ask you, what's your favorite story of karma catching up to someone? Because Daniel, his lesson hadn't even started yet. The cracks he ignored were widening, and Claire was almost ready to push, not in the way he expected, but in the way that would change everything. Arrogance has a way of writing its own downfall, doesn't it? And Daniel, he was practically authoring a novel. At first, no one questioned him. He walked into boardrooms with that smug smile, tossing out big promises like confetti. Deals signed, toasts raised. But cracks don't stay hidden forever. The first slip came during a dinner party. Investors, wives, journalists all gathered in Daniel's glass palace of a mansion. He was in rare form, boasting about a project so massive it would redefine the market. Claire sat silently at his side, her posture calm, her expression unreadable. Then someone asked a simple question. Numbers, projections. Daniel faltered. Just for a moment, but it was enough. He brushed it off with a laugh, made some cruel joke about leaving the math to the accountants. The room chuckled politely, but eyes darted. A seed of doubt was planted. From there, things unraveled in whispers. An investor pulled out. A client backed away. Rumors began swirling that Daniel was reckless and stable even. And the man who once thrived on control. He started snapping at the very people he needed most. Behind closed doors, his temper exploded. "You think you're smarter than me?" He barked at Claire one evening. She didn't rise to the bait. She never did anymore. She simply looked at him, serene, like his words couldn't touch her. And that silence, it drove him mad, because while Daniel was busy clawing at the crumbling edges of his empire, Claire's quiet dignity made her glow. To outsiders, she looked like the strong, graceful partner standing tall beside a man in freefall. No dramatics, no outbursts, just presence. Funny how restraint can be louder than rage. Business partners who once dismissed her as the pretty wife began pulling her aside, asking gentle questions, watching the way she carried herself with composure while Daniel flailed. Her calm was magnetic. His chaos was contagious, and Daniel felt it. The shift in the air, the subtle turning of heads away from him and toward her, the true breaking point, a charity gala. Cameras flashing, champagne flowing, the perfect stage for appearances. Daniel, desperate, launched into another pompous speech. He bragged about generosity, success, legacy, words dripping with ego, and then mid-sentence one of his former partners interrupted him. Calm, deliberate, "Daniel, with all due respect, we'd rather hear from Claire." The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel's face turned the color of storm clouds. Claire, caught off guard, didn't flinch. She stepped forward, voice steady, words measured. She didn't boast. She didn't gloat. She simply spoke about compassion, responsibility, and resilience. By the time she finished, the applause was thunderous. Not for him, for her, and that's the cruel poetry of it. The man who abandoned his pregnant wife in the rain now stood abandoned himself by allies, by friends, by the very image he worshipped. Meanwhile, the woman he tried to silence became the one people actually listened to. So now I'll ask you, what do you think Claire should do next? Should she walk away for good, leaving Daniel to choke on the ashes of his empire? Or should she stay just long enough to make him face every consequence head on? Vote in the poll on screen, because trust me, her choice is going to decide just how cold this revenge gets served. Daniel wasn't prepared for the sight that greeted him. It was supposed to be a routine evening. He came home expecting silence, maybe a nervous wife waiting in the corner. Instead, Claire stood in the center of the room, poised, calm, and next to her like a shadow from the past, the bodyguard he'd fired years ago. For a moment, Daniel froze. His jaw clenched, his eyes narrowed. You could almost see the calculation spinning behind his gaze. Then came the sneer. "So," he said, voice dripping with venom, "you went crawling back to him? That's what this is." Claire didn't flinch. Not this time. Her hand rested gently on her belly, her other hand steady at her side. "No, Daniel," she replied softly. "I didn't crawl. He came back. Because he actually cares whether I live or die." The words landed like a slap. Daniel turned on the bodyguard, eyes blazing. "You were supposed to be gone. I made sure of it." The bodyguard didn't blink. His voice was low, even. "You don't get to decide who protects her." The tension in the room could have cracked glass. But the real shift wasn't in their standoff, it was in Claire, because for the first time, she didn't look small. She didn't look defeated. She looked untouchable. "Daniel," she said, cutting through the silence, "you tried to teach me respect. You tried to break me down so I'd depend on you. But all you taught me," she paused, her eyes steady on his, "is that I deserve better than you." He laughed, sharp and bitter. "You think anyone will believe you over me? I made you." And that's when Claire smiled. Not sweet, not nervous, just calm, powerful. "No, you unmade yourself." And everyone's finally starting to see it. That silence afterward, it was heavier than any storm, because Daniel realized in that instant that the control he clung to like a crown had slipped. She wasn't begging anymore. She wasn't even angry. She was free. And here's the thing about lessons, they don't always land where you aim them. Sometimes, the lesson you try to teach ends up being the one you needed most. Daniel wanted to remind Claire who held the power. Instead, he walked straight into the moment he realized he'd lost it forever. Freedom doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it slips in quietly like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. For Claire, that moment came in the weeks after the confrontation. She no longer waited for Daniel's approval. She no longer checked over her shoulder, bracing for his temper. Instead, she woke each morning with a strange new feeling. Peace.it wasn't flashy. It wasn't dramatic. But after everything she had endured, peace was revolutionary. With the bodyguard by her side, Claire began to rebuild. He wasn't just muscle in a tailored suit. He was steady, grounded, a constant reminder that loyalty didn't need to be bought. He opened doors, yes, but he also listened. He respected her choices. He treated her not as fragile, but as capable. Funny how someone Daniel dismissed as just hired help managed to embody the very qualities Daniel never could. Claire also discovered something else: independence. For years, Daniel had hidden financial details, making sure she felt tethered to his empire. But she had learned more than he realized. With careful planning and a little help from people who believed in her, she secured her own accounts, her own safety net. Every dollar saved wasn't just money. It was proof. Proof she could stand on her own, and here's what made it powerful: her journey wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. Sure, Daniel's downfall was satisfying to watch, but Claire's true victory was quieter.it, was in the laughter she shared with friends. She'd once been isolated from .it was in the way she could walk into a room without shrinking.it was in the hand she placed protectively over her belly, whispering promises of a life filled with love, not fear. Daniel tried to strip away her strength, but in the end, he revealed it. Claire didn't need to shout her triumph. She didn't need grand speeches or dramatic exits. Her power came from the simple, unshakable choice to never let herself be mistreated again. Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's found in the quiet decision to walk forward, one steady step at a time, and never look back, and that's exactly what Claire did, and that's how it ended. Daniel, the millionaire who thought he could play God with people's lives, wound up exposed, scrambling to hold together the image he worshipped while everything beneath it crumbled. His arrogance cost him allies, reputation, and the one person who ever stood by him. And Claire, she walked away with her dignity intact, her strength undeniable, and her future no longer chained to his cruelty. Betrayal may have been the spark, but transformation was the fire, because sometimes the harshest wounds teach us the clearest truths. Sometimes, the person who tries to break you only ends up proving how unbreakable you really are. Claire didn't need to scream for justice. She lived it. She became it. And Daniel's downfall? That was just the echo of his own choices catching up to him. So maybe the real lesson here is this: betrayal doesn't always end in ruin. Sometimes it plants the seed of someone's rebirth. If you found this story as chillingly satisfying as I did, please hit like, drop a comment, and subscribe. These scripts take hours to write, and your support helps us keep these stories alive. Until next time, remember, strength doesn't always shout. Sometimes it's in the quiet choice to never be mistreated again.